The southern border is absolutely wide open. We're allowing anybody and everybody into the country. Meanwhile, our border with Canada remains closed to prevent those pesky Canucks from coming in here and infecting us with their politeness, I guess.
Bringing you law, gospel, and guns. This is Armed Lutheran Radio.
Hi, folks. Welcome to Armed Lutheran Radio. It's a show about guns, hunting, competitive shooting, the natural right of self-defense, and what God's Word says about the issues surrounding gun rights and gun ownership. I'm your host, Lloyd Bailey, the Armed Lutheran, and this is episode number 277. And joining me again this week, back from a well-deserved vacation, the pistol-packing padre himself, John Bennett. Pastor, welcome back.
Thank you, Lloyd. It's been too long.
It has. You had a nice long vacation, well-deserved, as I said. Hope you and the family had fun.
Oh, yeah, we did. It was pretty good. We went down to Florida, took the kids to Orlando, did a bunch of theme parks. But there was one hiccup. Less than 24 hours of being down there. You know, we were staying in this condo in this resort community, and it had a little, patio out back with its own little pool, about a 12 by 12 pool. It was a small pool. And less than 24 hours into it, I stepped on a piece of broken glass that had been left out there.
Oh.
Yeah. So I thought I'd gotten the piece of glass out, and the next day, I got my pocket knife, thought I had dug it out, Next day, end up walking close to 10 miles at the Magic Kingdom. And the next day, it hurt like heck, and come to find out it had gotten infected. So I had to spend the rest of the trip riding on a scooter the whole time. So that was fun. And,
man.
Yeah. And then on Sunday, July 27th, so was that July 27th? I can't remember. But the last Sunday in July, I'm taking a shower. I took the bandage off my foot because this whole time it's been really tender and just didn't look quite right. There was a lot of dead skin there. So, I went downstairs and I sanitized an X-Acto knife and cut off the dead skin, and
oh, dear God.
something didn't look quite right. That stinking piece of glass was still in there 27 days later.
Oh, my gosh.
So, yeah. So next time you're in Florida, wear your flip-flops.
Wear flip-flops. God. Yikes. Just want to put my fingers in my ears and go, la, 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 la.
Aside from that, though, it was a really good trip.
It was great. Aside from reliving that scene from Die Hard.
If only I would have had a roll of duct tape to bandage it up, it would have been great.
I'm glad you're back, and I'm glad you're still able to walk.
Yes.
Haven't lost any appendages. Well, what we thought we would do here today with COVID cases rising again and all this talk of new variants and doomsday variants and such, we thought we'd revisit the topic of government authority and look back at the past 15 months to see what we've learned, if anything. Before we do that, I want to thank the awesome men and women who make this show possible, the men and women who are members of the Reformation Gun Club. Armed Lutheran Radio is listener-supported, listener-funded. That means that we rely on the monthly and annual contributions from our members. And this week, I want to give a thank you and a shout-out to Jerry and Billy from Deer Lodge, Montana, John N., Kevin from Fairfax, Missouri, Michael from Janesville, Minnesota, Robert from Bothell, Washington, and our newest member, Samuel from Milton, Washington. Thank you all so much for your support. To all of our members, thank you, especially during these trying economic times. We really do appreciate it. Armed Lutheran Radio as I said, is listener funded. That means we rely on the support of our listeners, not advertisers or sponsors. For as little as $1 a month, you can get access to hundreds of hours of exclusive content, a members-only podcast, invitations to our monthly online hangouts, and the satisfaction of knowing that you helped make all of this madness possible. Check it all out, see the benefits available and the exclusive content available to members by going to armedlutheran.us/gun club, or look for a link in the show notes for this or any of our previous episodes. All right, so you may recall back in March and April of last year, in episodes 212, 213, and 217, Coronapalooza. Was it Coronapalooza? Yes,
I think
Coronapalooza.
that's what we called it, yeah.
Coronapalooza parts 1 through 3. So I guess this is part 4.
Yeah, and as I recall, you plugged that on the Unload and Show Clear podcast and caused somebody to run for their safe space. So
yeah, we were. Indeed, I did. We discussed government authority and the steps that government was taking at the time to try to combat this new pandemic that was just unfolding at the time. And we were told, if you recall, that we needed 15 days to flatten the curve. Well, here we are 15 months later, and we're doing it all again, it looks like. And I think the original impressions that we had back then, a lot of the things that we talked about back then, I think have been borne out. We subsequently killed the U.S. economy, sent millions of people into unemployment lines and lockdowns, tens of thousands of elderly to their deaths. We set a generation of students back a year by closing all of our schools, canceled large gatherings, except for riots and protests and the funerals of deceased drug addicts. And we saw arguments and violence over face masks, of all things. And we were told that we needed to endure all this crap until there was a vaccine. But now we're being told that even with a vaccine, we should wear masks. And at one point, it was even 2 masks.
And now you've got this joker with the what is it called? Not the CDC, but the
National Institutes of Health.
The NIH. Yeah, the NIH saying if you need to be wearing masks around your children in the home, even if you're unvaccinated.
That's just, yeah. So, and it's the same. And if you've noticed, it's the same jokers in the CDC and the NIH that were telling us all kinds of crazy stuff last year when Trump was president. Now Biden's president, we've still got the same junk, craziness and distortions and misinformation coming at us. Social media, of course, is mercilessly working to silence people who might dare to question the orthodoxy on masks or vaccines. And now we've got this talk about variants. First, it's the Delta variant, and then I think I saw something about like a Lambda variant, and like, what's it going to?
Now they're talking about the Delta Plus variant to make it sound even more scary. They should at this point just take a page out of Orwell's 1984 and call it the Delta Double Plus Ungood variant to make it sound super scary.
That's right. The Delta Plus sounds like some sort of a friendly flyers program for an airline. But it looks like we're getting ready to do all this stuff all over again, like we didn't learn anything over the past 15 months. What is your take on where we are now compared to where we were 15 months ago?
Well, I'm sure none of this has to do with whatever's happening in 2022. I think there's something important happening next year, but, just can't quite put my finger on it.
There's something coming up, something big. And I know everything that happened last time was because of something big that was coming up in November last year.
Yeah. And this is all about the midterm elections.
Yeah.
I don't want to sound cynical. I don't want to sound like a conspiracy theorist, But right now, you've got a poll just came out either yesterday or today. 74% of Americans want voter ID. A vast majority of Americans want to make it easier to vote, but also make it more difficult to cheat. And right now, the Democratic Party is so horribly unpopular. You look at what Biden just did. He should be impeached after the Supreme Court told him that you cannot extend the moratorium of evictions. And he just said, oh, well, we're just going to do it anyway.
The Constitution.
Yeah, the heck with the Constitution, the heck with private property rights. How many landlords out there do you think are going to be pulling the lever for the Democrat next election? So all of this, and I'll go to the southern border too, that they're letting in tens of thousands a day pouring through our border. They're busing them into the interior of the country. They're not testing them for COVID. They already know that many of these people are positive for COVID. And I guarantee all of this is to try and spread this pandemic even further, so they have to lock everything down again and try and get the universal mail-in voting again so that they can cheat their way out of losing the next election.
Do you think a lot of the hyperventilating we're hearing about all these variants is largely to distract people from the fact that Biden and Harris are so horribly unpopular at the moment, or their numbers are trending southward, and Harris is most unpopular vice president in recent history, something like that? I mean, she's got really, really not good. They've got a problem with her. If Biden can't serve out the rest of his term, they've got a real problem because she is grossly unpopular.
Yes. I mean, we don't have a problem. The Democrat Party has a problem.
Yep.
And all of this, yes, it seems like a huge distraction. Now they're talking about how you need to wear the mask even if you're vaccinated. And yet, according to all the science, we're told to trust the science, trust the experts. Right. The science says that the vaccine is effective in protecting you against all the known variants up until this point. Right now, they're talking about, the breakthrough infections and how, people are getting hospitalized and all this. That reports are coming out of emergency rooms. There was one down in Florida where out of the fatalities that they had within this, I forget if it was a county or a single hospital or whatnot. I don't remember the exact details, but I do remember this detail. Out of all the COVID deaths that they have had within a week's time, only one of those was someone who had already been vaccinated. Right now, you have a 1 in 27,000 chance of getting a breakthrough infection. That means you've already been vaccinated and yet you still get it anyway. 1 in 27,000 chance. 27,000 chance. Of those who get it again, roughly 0.5% will die from it. So you have a 1 in 500,000 chance of dying from it. And yet 1 out of 10,000 Americans dies every year in a car crash.
Right. Yeah, there's so many other things that kill us every year, and yet this is the one that we're freaking out about. Let's look back at what we've learned or haven't over the past 15 months, and let's consider some of the things that were attempted. Did they work? Was it a good idea, a bad idea? And do you think the government will try it again? So let's start with, we've alluded to it already, lockdowns. The idea that we've got to, this was the 15 days to flatten the curve thing, right? Stay home, stay away from people, flatten the curve. Let's lock down, stay away from everyone else. Don't come to work. Don't go out shopping. Stay home. Do you think that was a good idea? Did it work? Will we do it again?
It worked if your goal was to demoralize the population and kill the economy.
Right.
No, and
I guess I should have defined worked.
Yeah. Now this is one of those data points that's really hard to research in a controlled scientific environment. But if you look at the data across all the states, those states that had the strictest lockdowns also had the highest death rates.
Mm-hmm.
You had New York and California and New Jersey. Those were the big three for the death rates. Illinois was up there because that entire state is run by the city of Chicago. And yet you have places like Florida that had far lower death rates than did California, even though it's roughly the same population density. And so there's no empirical evidence whatsoever to show that it helped, and yet there's lots of anecdotal evidence that demonstrates that it actually did more harm.
Right. And the states that didn't lock down were the governors were pretty much pilloried in the media, and they're starting to do it again. I've seen some back and forth with DeSantis in Florida as rates are rising again. It's not the problem with lockdowns was that you're locking people up in closed environments who, you're trying to tell people, well, you need to social distance, but then you lock them all in together.
Yes. In indoor environments where the virus thrives, as opposed to outdoors where every single researcher who has looked into this has determined that this virus does not survive the ultraviolet radiation from the sun, the ultraviolet light, I should say. And so this thing is killed by UV light, but you have to stay indoors so that you don't catch the virus.
Right. So then now we're seeing an uptick again because it's been an unusual summer.
Yes.
Hot in places that are hotter in places that usually aren't this hot. And people are now going back indoors. And I think that's part of why we're seeing some of the uptick.
I wouldn't be surprised. You look at the trends, and you look at places like the upper Midwest. You look at the Northeast and the Northwest, the states where it's colder during the summer. Colder during the winter. And you had a spike in COVID infections during the winter, where you have places like Florida and Texas, where it's warm and people are outside enjoying themselves, where the infection rates were actually waning.
Yeah.
And so there's lots of clear evidence to show that the more you are indoors, the greater a threat this virus has of spreading.
Yeah. So we've learned from our past 15 months of experience that indoor settings are probably the most dangerous. So hopefully we don't do this whole lockdown thing again. I think the other, getting back to the political point, I think one of the reasons that I think that we won't do the lockdowns again is because I think Democrats are going to get creamed next year.
Yes.
And if they lock everybody down again, the wave that hits them in the midterms is going to be like nothing they've ever seen.
Yeah, and I think what's happening right now in Australia has them worried, because you see what Australia did. They locked down the country, and when they first did this is the crazy part. When they first did this, they were talking about how they had 81 or 82,000 tests, and out of those, there was 111 positive results.
What?
Yes, that is a minutia. That is a tiny portion of the people actually tested positive. And because of that, they were locking, I forget which province it was in. They were locking, I think it was Sydney. Yeah, in fact, it was Sydney. They were locking everything down, telling people they couldn't even leave the area to go to work. They had to stay indoors and so forth. And now they've got massive, massive protests where people are pushing back by the tens of thousands against these lockdowns because they're tired of having the government destroy their lives. And if the Aussies are going to have the courage to do that, what do you think the Americans are going to do if you try to do this to them again?
Yeah. I think the American people are beyond the fed up point. And I don't think any amount of the scare tactics are going to make a change to that. I think they're going to look at the last 15 months and remember all of the misinformation and disinformation that they've been fed, all the contradictions, and all of the hardship that they went through with the lockdowns. And if it happens again, they're just not going to, I mean, we already see people that are, when you suggest that, oh, you need to get vaccinated or you need to wear a mask or you need to social distance, and people are like, screw that, I'm getting back to my life. If you try to lock these people down, we might just have another Boston Tea Party.
Yes. Well, especially when you're telling people that even if you're vaccinated now, you still have to wear the mask.
Yeah.
Where's the motivation then for getting the vaccine if you're told that you still need to be under the same restrictions even if you're vaccinated?
Yep. So now if we've learned that lockdowns don't work, we were also told plenty last year that gathering outdoors was a bad idea. And that was just insane. And we still see people, even now, I'm still seeing people outside running around with masks on. All right, so we banned large gatherings, we closed churches, we closed schools. Good idea, bad idea? What do you think was the negative effect of this? And do you think that we'll try to do that sort of thing again?
I think it really just pissed a lot of people off.
Mm-hmm.
It destroyed children's education for the last year and a half. Now they're saying that they may not go back to school this coming year. I thank the Lord that my children are in a parochial school where they don't have to listen to the dictates of the government. Mm-hmm. It's absolutely insane. You have the people who are so thoroughly brainwashed that they'll listen to anything you tell them as long as it's coming from the government. But at this point, I think a lot of people have woken up to the reality of what's happening. One of the, I forget which entertainer it was, that pretty popular guy, he was going to be having a concert series, and it was Eric Clapton. And he had taken the first shot of the vaccine.
Oh, yeah.
He had some very bad side effect where he couldn't play guitar for months because of what it did to his hands. And he said that I will not play at any venue that requires vaccinated people to have a vaccination to attend. I just won't play.
Right.
And that's the kind of political power that's going to have to be exercised by freedom-loving people within this country, that you're just going to have to tell people, screw your rules. No, absolutely not. And the thing that is so ironic about this is that, what has been one of the arguments of the pro-choice folks? It's been, don't
my body, my choice.
My body, my choice. Don't tell me what to do with my body. And now you have the government who is telling people what to do with your body. More than that, they're telling you, we have to put this experimental drug into your body, and it's for your own good. Tell that to the parents of the 13-year-old boy who died a day after getting his second dose of the vaccine from a heart condition that turns out seems to be somewhat common among young people.
Yeah. Yep. It seems to me that we're trading the trade-off here, where we're basically giving up liberty for the promise of security again, right? Where Benjamin Franklin talked about it, those who are willing to give up security for the promise, or give up their liberty for the promise of security, will find that they have neither. I'm paraphrasing.
Yes.
I think government has one of the lessons that I think we've learned, and we talked about this in several different previous episodes on the subject. One of the things I think that we've learned is that government has come out of this pandemic, or come through this pandemic, with one amazing lesson, and that is, as long as you can tell people there is an emergency, you can pretty much do anything, right?
Yes.
They from all levels, city, state, federal, if there's an emergency, we can basically, as you were talking about earlier with the eviction moratorium, we can suspend the Constitution for your good, supposedly.
Yes.
And and I was going to ask you if you thought that that governments would try to do this again, and I'm afraid that they will, even despite knowing the backlash that they're likely to get in the midterms.
Right. Yeah, and it's already happening. You see what that joke of a mayor, Bill de Blasio, did in New York City, where they're coming out with the vaccine passport stating that unless you've been vaccinated, you cannot participate in indoor dining, movie theaters, sports clubs, that kind of thing. You're going to be prohibited. And it's like the Nazis asking for your papers. This will continue, and it can only continue as long as you can convince a large enough portion of the population that it is still an emergency. And what was happening is, you look at what the infection rates were going into June, July, that they were a tenth of what they were back in January. But how many people in this country are informed enough to have known that those were the facts? And so they say, oh, the numbers are up because, a few weeks earlier they were a little bit lower. So you create more panic because you have to convince people there still exists this emergency so that you can have these sheep continue being willing to surrender their liberty because Big Daddy Uncle Sam is going to keep you safe if you just follow what they say.
Right. And what's strange is, to me anyway, and probably to many people, is this idea that people will listen to, like you said, they will listen to all this stuff, they will accept it blindly and ignore the obvious contradictions around them. Like, all right, we can't go to church, but we can go protest. And all the kids going on spring break in Florida last year, remember that they're the cause of they're spreading the virus, but it's perfectly safe to go out and burn a neighborhood down in Minnesota.
Right. Or Chicago or Detroit.
Chicago.
Yeah. So, just a perfect example of the inconsistencies, that we're supposed to be terrified of this virus and we can't have large public gatherings. And yet there were over 100,000 people that attended Lollapalooza last week.
Yeah. Yep.
And there was a video that someone had put on social media that, they're checking for your vaccination card. And you just have people walking by dozens at a time, just walking through a line, holding up a piece of paper, and they just kept on walking. No one was taking a look at those pieces of paper to make sure that these people were actually vaccinated.
No. It's security theater to make everybody feel better, and then let's get on with our lives. And like you were talking earlier, the southern border is absolutely wide open. We're allowing anybody and everybody into the country, despite all the new spikes in COVID. And like you said, we're busing these people to wherever we don't know. Meanwhile, our border with Canada remains closed to prevent those pesky Canucks from coming in here and infecting us with their politeness, I guess. I mean, why people don't notice that contradiction is beyond me.
Yeah.
And you mentioned this earlier, and the thing about the Karen who stopped listening to my other podcast because he thought I was on the wrong side of the mask debate, and he didn't like my comparison to the Great War in episode 220. What does all of this fear, this constant overriding fear say about us as Americans? I mean, there are millions and millions, like we said, there's millions of things that kill people every year in greater numbers than COVID. Heart disease and cancer and the flu used to kill people. I don't know how we managed to cure the flu.
Yeah.
And yet you don't see us hiding from it. We don't hide from those things. We don't suspend our lives out of fear of catching something or getting killed by something.
We don't
But
stop
for
driving cars because, 1 in 10,000 people die every year.
But for some reason, millions of Americans are willing to give up their liberties to supposedly to fight this virus.
Yeah. Yeah. I think part of this goes back to years of indoctrination within the universities and public education. There is a stark contrast between public schools now versus public schools even 20 years ago. Now people are being told not only what to think, but what to believe and how to act towards those who do not agree with you. And when we have so many people that have been so thoroughly conditioned to listen to the experts, to follow the advice of those in authority, and to never question what they're being told, that's how we get to this point.
Mm-hmm.
The other side of this, too, is that you have people who so ardently worship at the altar of the Democrat Party that even if they do not believe in this insanity themselves when it comes to all the fear porn regarding coronavirus, that they will still toe the line just to be marching in step with the Democrat Party.
They can't accept that maybe the Republican who is skeptical might be right.
Yes.
So they'd rather stick with the Democrat who is telling them obvious lies.
Right. Yeah. Pay no attention to AOC, who is caught on video not wearing a mask, talking to a bunch of people. But then when it's time to take the photo op, she suddenly puts the mask on for the photo op, then takes it off afterwards.
Right. Or the mayor of D.C. who imposed another mask mandate in the city, and yet was caught the day after?
Yeah.
In a large indoor gathering
she
with no mask on.
officiated the wedding.
That's right.
Officiated the wedding.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Insane. So let's as we kind of close things down, let's talk vaccines. Why not? I mean, we haven't done enough to get us banned so far. So let's see if we can rile up the social media overlords. Millions of Americans remain skeptical of vaccines after all of the campaigns. I mean, you can't turn on television or watch YouTube without being bombarded with PSAs about getting vaxxed. Social media is, like I said, they've been really active in squashing any voices of people who are skeptical about them. And the Biden administration, or Biden-Harris, I need to get it correct. The Biden-Harris administration has been even floating the idea of sending government goons door to door to make sure that you're vaxxed. I've even seen posts suggesting that if you're a good Christian, because of your love for neighbor, you need to get the vaccine. What do you make of those who make that suggestion? What do you make of that argument? And what do you say to those who are still hesitant about getting the vaccine?
When there's such a hard push, you automatically create skepticism. I think that's our human nature leads us to be skeptical. You look at Adam and Eve, the fall into sin, and the temptation was A, to be like God, and B, to be skeptical of what God said. And so, even though, you have a lot of automatons who are going to, take every bit of propaganda that they're fed and believe it's gospel truth, you also have a good number of people who are very skeptical when you have the federal government pushing so hard for you to do this thing because it's for your own good. And it's just my personal take. I did have the vaccine. I had the, I can't even remember the one that starts with an M, Moderna. That's the one.
Moderna.
I had the Moderna vaccine. Yeah, the reaction wasn't great, especially with the first shot. I'm in a higher risk category because I have asthma. And so as bad as I had the virus back in September of last year, I wanted to mitigate any chances of me getting it a second time. And so, from my perspective, it seems to be fairly safe. The number of bad reactions, at least for those that are of a certain age. If you're under 30, I think it's pointless to get the vaccine personally, because statistically, those who are under 30, unless you have serious comorbidities, maybe it wouldn't be a bad idea if you've got some of those, you're in one of those risk categories that makes this virus more lethal for you. But if you're not, what's the point? The thing that I have the biggest problem with is the hard push to get children vaccinated. When this is something that is an experimental drug, I just today, I get this crap in the mail from the state of Minnesota trying to convince me to get my daughters immunized. I'm sorry. I'm not going to make them guinea pigs. They don't know what the side effects are of this long term. When you had someone who had, it was someone that was in Pfizer, one of the, someone in the corporate that had leaked out or had revealed that this could potentially have problems with fertility. We don't know yet what those problems are. So don't experiment on my children, and don't even make the suggestion. I mean, I'm furious that they are trying to push me to get my daughters vaccinated, especially when A, children are the least likely to get the virus, and B, once they have it, they're the least likely to spread it. And this came out of Johns Hopkins University. For anyone who's listening to this that might be slightly skeptical on, what I'm saying about not vaccinating your children with this.
Before you go full Karen and decide to cancel your subscription.
Yes, before you shut us off and report us to Facebook and so forth. Johns Hopkins University conducted a study where they basically researched all of the child-related deaths to COVID, or related to COVID-19. There were 0 children who died who did not have a pre-existing medical condition. Every single COVID death for children, and it's heartbreaking for a child to die from this. Every single death, the child had comorbidities that made the virus more lethal for them. So, if you have a child that has a immunodeficiency and they're more susceptible and this could kill them, I'm not going to hold it against you. Whatever you decide to do, that's your choice. But to tell me that I have to get my child vaccinated to protect grandma and grandpa, I'm sorry. Not going to do it.
Yeah. It doesn't make sense. And it's that skepticism you talked about is made worse when we've endured the past 15 months of all the different stories coming from fools like Anthony Fauci, who will tell you one thing one day, and then on the next day will tell you something completely different. Masks you've got to wear a mask, then you don't have to wear a mask. Masks help, then masks don't. Now you need to wear 2 masks. Now you need to wear a mask even if you get vaccinated. No, you don't need to wear a mask if you've been vaccinated. No, now you need to wear 2 masks, maybe 3.
Yeah.
Wrap yourself in bubble wrap. People are now, that natural skepticism is like off the charts. It's not natural anymore because it's been exacerbated by all of the, we were told for months and months and months about how Trump mishandled and mismanaged the response to the pandemic. Well, what exactly has gotten better?
Yeah.
Nothing. Because the same people are feeding us the same BS or changing their opinions on it from one day to the next. There's not really any difference. And so people, even if government comes out and says, hey, this is a good idea, this is safe, and it is a good idea and it is safe, we have 15 months of being lied to that has made people uber skeptical about anything they hear from government.
Right. And you mentioned Anthony Fauci. Personally, I believe that he either ought to spend the rest of his life in Guantanamo Bay or he should be tried for crimes against humanity. Because this guy, A, he knew that they were doing gain-of-function research at the Wuhan lab. B, There's also been emails that have been released that showed that he knew what was going on in relation to the research that that led to the leak of this outbreak, and he wants to continue giving them more money.
Mm-hmm.
And he's lied about it time after time after time. It could be argued that his actions of funneling money to that Wuhan lab are partly responsible for this virus that has killed millions of people worldwide.
Yeah. Yeah. And like everyone else in government, in bureaucracy, and particularly those who are linked to Democrat administrations, nothing is ever going to get done. Those people never pay a price. I mean, we're finally seeing. You remember we were talking about Andrew Cuomo, right?
Yeah.
How if he would simply come out and say, I think we talked about this on a show once, if he would just have come out and said, look, we tried what we thought was best, it didn't work, it was a mistake, and it had owned up to it, we could have respected him for at least being honest. And now it looks like what's going to get him is not the fact that he killed thousands of the elderly with his horrible policies and then subsequent months and months of lying about it. He's going to get in trouble over grabbing fannies and being a little too personable with his subordinates.
And honestly, I think all of that, if it hadn't been for the fact that he so horribly managed the situation in New York and that he isn't directly responsible for the death of perhaps thousands in New York, if it weren't for that, they probably would have ignored it and swept it under the rug just like they did with Bill Clinton. But, you know, there was talk about him months back of potential presidential aspirations. They gave him a stinking Emmy Award for his newscasts on coronavirus.
Yep.
And they are ignoring all of that and just focusing on this one thing. So it's all political theater.
It is. Any thoughts on how we fix that? Because that skepticism, that distrust of government and everything that they say, because they keep pushing things, they keep telling us different stories. The people who mismanage all of these crises, supposed crises, never seem to pay for their bad decisions. Is there any way to fix all of this? I don't know how we get past it, aside from somebody comes along and puts all these people in jail and says, all right, we're going to start over.
Right.
I don't know how we fix this.
Suddenly the French Revolution doesn't look like it was too terrible of a thing. I shouldn't say that. I'm kidding. Just want to clarify that.
We're not advocating for a guillotine and out in front of the Washington Monument.
Right.
That wouldn't be
right. Yeah. Let's not fill that little, I don't know what you call it, the pool or whatever there on the National Mall. Let's not fill that with the blood of all these godless heathen people. No, now, of course, I don't have a crystal ball, but I suspect that things are going to get worse before they get better. There might be some people here that are thinking, well, how can it get any worse? Right now,
just you wait.
Yes, the Democrat Party is in panic mode. You have the tech tyrants who are censoring anyone who dares to speak the truth, or to even or to at the very least question what the government is saying. You have the support from the public that is just absolutely plummeting. Again, 74% of Americans want voter ID. So you have a lot of people that are waking up to what's actually happening. And the more that happens, the more panicked the government is going to get, to the point where their actions are so tyrannical that even those who and we see it happening with people who voted for Biden that are now furious and have pledged support for Republicans in the future. So it's happening. It's going to happen slowly, I think. and then it's going to speed up. I think we're looking at a gradual change in the political winds within the next 6 months, and then I think it's really going to gain steam the months leading up to the 2022 election. But from what I'm hearing, from what I'm reading, and just my hunch is that things are going to get better because people, the more and more this persists, the less and less complacent people are becoming.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Especially the people who have, look, I did everything you told me to do. I locked down. I lost my job. I stayed home. I wore the mask. I got the vaccine. And now you're telling me to do it all over again? No, I'm finished.
The bank impounded my rental property because I haven't been able to pay the mortgage in the last 15 months because I'm not getting any rent for it.
Yeah. That's really egregious.
Yes.
That's a whole different show. Oh my gosh. Yeah. But I think you're right. I think we're seeing some positive signs, but like you said, it's going to get worse before it gets better as the Democrat Party continues to try to prevent. I mean, they had all these great dreams of, all right, we got rid of Trump. We have control of both houses of Congress. We've got the White House. We can do whatever we want. Oh no.
Yeah.
Where did all that go?
Yeah.
And they're going to find out that I think that all of the damage that was done to Trump as a result of COVID is now going to land in Biden's lap and the Democrats' lap, and now they're going to pay the price.
Right now, it seems like they are tying the knot in their own noose. It's absolutely mind-boggling to see what's happened. But God is still in control. But don't be complacent. Do not trust the government. It's we could talk about what Paul says in Romans all we want, but Paul talks about how the government is instituted for our good, and right now the government is intent on doing harm wherever it can. So, yeah.
Yep, absolutely. All right. Well, that was fun. We haven't talked COVID in a while. We thought we would try to get back on the radar of the social media overlords and see if we can get ourselves a Facebook ban or something.
And I was trying to think of this, and then it went. And now it's back in my mind. We shouldn't even bother calling it the Democrat Party anymore.
No.
The party that exists today would be unrecognizable by JFK. It's become the Communist Party of America. You look at what's happening with the tech companies, with all-out censorship. For crying out loud, they still will not allow Donald Trump. Even if you have an interview with Donald Trump, YouTube will ban that video.
Mm-hmm.
It's this is speech suppression. It's thought control because they're only putting out the information that they want you to know, the propaganda. So, yeah, it's no longer the Democrat Party as far as I'm concerned.
No, and the harder they push, hopefully, the harder the American people will fight back. Come election time,
Amen.
We can only hope.
Amen.
All right. Well, Pastor, thank you so much for doing this. Great to have you back.
It's good to be back. Yeah.
had to come home to rest up from your vacation.
Yes. Yes. Especially when you have a piece of glass in your foot for 27 days.
All right. Well, folks, if you have any questions or any comments or any complaints that you'd like to lodge, don't send them to Facebook. Send them to us. We'd love to hear from you and respond in a future episode. Next week, I'm on vacation. Hopefully, taking the family for a little jaunt before school starts, and then but we'll have another variety show next week for episode 278. Until then, keep shooting, keep praying. We'll talk to you next time.
John Bennett is the pastor at St. John's Lutheran Church in Willow Creek, Minnesota. For more information, visit stjohnswillowcreek.org. For show notes, be sure to visit our website at www.armedlutheran.us. Check out the Facebook page, The Armed Lutheran, or join our Facebook group, Fans of Armed Lutheran Radio. If you like what you hear, please leave us a comment on our feedback page at armedlutheran.us/feedback or a review on iTunes and let us know what you think. Thank you for listening to Armed Lutheran Radio, a member of the Self-Defense Radio Network.